what happens when you die in it.
Yeah, so when you die in the video game, you die in the video game.
Ladies, gentlemen, and Haradrim of all ages, tonight was the night of a special stream with the Diablo 4 developers, specifically the final stream the developers will be giving us for the entire rest of this year. A campfire chat giving us a deeper dive on the upcoming events for the rest of this season, specifically the upcoming major patch on December 5th, along with the Abattoir of Zir, which is releasing with it, which got a full showcase where we got to see the senior community manager bring in his own defensive variant of a ball lightning build of all things, and show us the event in detail, both at Tier 1 and at Tier 10. And of course, just a bit of a little roundup of Midwinter Blight coming up the week after as well, with some slightly disappointing news about that. Then we just had a bit of a talk about what to expect in the future when it comes to the changes to the way that items will be working as a whole within the game, and some upcoming Helltide changes that will be a very big deal in the best of ways. That said, I'm here to break it all down for those who didn't want to watch the full 1-hour stream, or for those who did but just want my take on it personally. Going in the order that it was covered in the stream then, the very first thing that they covered was in relation to all the recent discussion and drama in the community related to the recent leaked survey from Blizzard about the game, in which there was questioning about both the concept of stash tabs being locked to different versions of the expansion that would cost different amounts of money, as well as early access to functional items such as legendaries and uniques, meaning that you would have these items that other players would not be able to use without paying money. Both of those would obviously be a massive issue and be a literal source of pay to win in Diablo 4, which we don't want. None of us want that. But the developers went immediately out of their way to say, hey, there are no plans for pay to win in any way. We know what you've been talking about. This is not going to happen. There's no plans for paid stash tabs, no plans for these unique items no one else can have, nothing like that. They did not say, however, that the survey was fake or anything like that, but they did say that they will not be adding in paid stash tabs or any type of pay to win to the game at any point in the near or distant future even. And if they stick to that, if they actually do what they're saying here, then we are all in the clear. No issues for me, at least. I won't complain. It's not a problem if it's not going to be a thing. We just also got a quick roundup and explanation of the Midwinter Blight seasonal event after that, just to sum it up all cleanly because we've talked about all this before. This is a holiday event coming December 12th. A friendly bard by the name of Gillian will show up in Kiovashad and ask you to hunt down the Red Cloaked Horror, a holiday boss and his little blighted minions who will be making merry around the Fractured Peaks. As you kill these various holiday-based creatures, you'll get little trophies that you can hand in back in Kiovashad to unlock both a variety of cosmetics from the event, as well as a unique elixir called Gillian's Brew. We'd seen some data mine tooltips for this that label it as being worth 15% maximum life, 15% lucky hit chance, and then also 15% bonus experience, which is of course an absolute ton more bonus experience than a normal elixir would give you, and the developers actually had some interesting but saddening news to share about that, which is that this elixir being tied to the event is only actually going to be active while you're in the Fractured Peaks region, at least properly, which from the devs said means that it simply will not work in dungeons, and that does suck a bit, but honestly, yeah, it's fair enough. The XP portion of it works wherever, so if that is what you wanted from them, then you're still fine, not an issue. But part of the excitement about this elixir is that 15% maximum life and 50% lucky hit is quite a lot of value from an elixir, so we actually were looking at this as a potential power increase for ourselves as players, which we now know it just isn't going to be. So essentially this event is now just all about having fun, enjoying these new enemies, the new boss, and getting some lovely cosmetics, and that's it. There's no problem with that. It just means that there's no power increases from it. It's just a nice, cute little thing that we can take part in. Past that, it's time that we talk about the big thing a lot of people want to hear about, which is the update coming on December 5th that contains the brand new ultra endgame activity, the Abattoir of Zir. This event is only going to be around for the rest of this season. It will be going away after that, and it is essentially the developers getting experimental, creating the deepest endgame activity they have ever made, at least as far as difficulty, and using this as a test to work out if this is the type of thing they want to add on in a more permanent manner. But this specific version of this is temporary quite purposefully. The developers have been constantly touting that they expect Tier 25 to be entirely uncompletable by players, but today we actually got to see it for ourselves. So let's analyze what happened and talk about the actual run-through of the Abattoir of Zir, because as I said earlier, they gave us a demonstration live of the senior community manager playing through Tier 1, then playing a bit of Tier 10 as well. Starting off, let's talk about the validity of his build, because he did show us it quite a bit. From what we could tell though, and I did discuss this with Josh of course, who is the sorcerer guy on our channel, and he said from looking at what we could see from his build, it was about average. It could definitely be improved to both be tankier and do more damage at the same time, but it's definitely not a bad build by any means, and it is ball lightning, which is important. This is a build that people are easily able to take into a tier 100, but it's not quite the highest possibility that ball lightning can reach. One annoyance that we had in trying to judge exactly how strong this was that the damage numbers were off, so that immediately removes our ability to judge that side of things properly. But from the gear that we could see him wearing, from the speed he was getting through enemies, and he wasn't even using Tivolts in the tier 1 at least, it seemed reasonably easy for him. The devs compared it to doing a tier 104 nightmare dungeon, at least at tier 1 in Abattoir of Zir. So essentially what that means is if you can comfortably complete a tier 100 nightmare dungeon, you should be able to get through tier 1 of Abattoir on release at minimum. As well, once you do so, you will get the Tears of Blood new special glyph at the end, which is actually a significant power increase that will make further tiers of this activity notably easier. That said, now that we have seen it properly, we can talk about more specifics. Upon starting a tier 1 version of this event, he was teleported in, and there was immediately a timer in the corner and a sort of a randomized dungeon layout in front of him, similar to pre-existing dungeons in the game. The monsters that you fight within are all a part of the same monster family as each other, which is randomly rolled and decided per sigil. He got snakes and snake-type enemies, but that is not a guaranteed thing to happen by any means. You progress through the dungeon, killing enemies as quickly as you can, and once you fill the bar, assuming that you do so before the timer runs out, all the regular enemies will disappear and will spawn in a group of 3 Bloodseekers, the Guardians. These are basically just slightly more powerful elites with a ton of affixes on them, then you have to take them down within the remaining part of your timer. Once you do so, the dungeon will be complete, you get a sigil, and you get literally 1000 glyph XP to spend from tier 1, which is enough to basically take any glyph that you own to max level near instantly. But the main reason that this number is this high is because the Tears of Blood glyph specifically from this event requires 2000 glyph XP to get the first level. So, you know, it's a pretty steep cost, and the only way that you'll be able to actually reasonably upgrade it will actually be playing Abattoir of Zir. After this, they brought the developer in again to do a tier 10 Abattoir of Zir. One big thing to note here is that they did not slot in the Tears of Blood glyph, which they probably should have. It is again a really big deal. They also had 2 uber uniques in their bags, both Shaco and Ahavarian, which you could see in the corner, but they didn't slot those on either for the tier 10, but they did put on Tibolt's Will at least to make the damage a bit higher, and the result was, well, simply just a massive lack of damage. The monsters that he was fighting were only labeled as being level 157, which isn't that high theoretically, but you could instantly tell the difference in life of the monsters compared to the tier 1 monsters was absolutely nuts. It was taking him so much longer to kill even basic trash, and in this specific build, the way that he had made it, there was no way he would finish within the timer because the damage just wasn't cutting it. So he got aggressive with it, and that meant that he died, which meant that it was over. I imagine if he had put on either or both of the uber uniques that were sitting in his inventory, or put on that Tears of Blood glyph as well, then a tier 10 would still likely have been doable for him, but that gives you a sort of idea of the difficulty of even a pretty good build if it is missing a couple of the pieces to make it perfect and how it will survive in Abattoir of Zir. As well, one last note here, someone asked about how this activity works with parties specifically. It is a 0 death limit, meaning that if you die, your sigil is fried, so if you do it in a party, does that mean that you can revive people and cheese it? And the developers said no, if anyone dies at all, then it counts and your run is over. There is no reviving, that's just it. Past that, we just had a little bit of a confirmation that the proper patch the Abattoir is a part of will have its full reveal tomorrow, with the patch notes themselves coming out then, and of course, we will be talking about those here on the channel as well once we can all have our own look at them. Once that was all over with then, they switched to much more future-related talks, specifically related to Season 3, and also some more major changes expected to hit around Season 4. As for the Season 3 stuff, they mentioned that they again are not going to touch or nerf things like Ball Lightning or Combo Points Rogue until the end of Season 2, but do be on the lookout for things to change more significantly when Season 3 is starting to begin on that front. As well, there are some new promised changes coming in with Season 3, which is to Helltide specifically, and it's something that we've all been asking for ages, which is increased uptime on Helltide. They are looking to swap it to 1-hour loops, meaning 55 minutes of Helltide being active, 5 minutes of break in between, then it starts again, which should really just be very big for both Living Steel Farm and also for Forgotten Souls. Just definitely a very correct change for them to be making without a doubt. Then finally, a pretty major topic. Again, this one is coming specifically with Season 4, so quite a bit of distance away, but they are looking even further into deeper changes to the way that itemization works within the game. I think it's a bit whack that a level 72 character can be in full 925 gear, as that sort of ruins the sense of progression from that point forward, but at the same time, the fact that 925 gear is only really actually farmable from Duriel and world bosses doesn't really feel quite right either. They want more places that you can actually farm higher tier loot from, but they want it to be stuff that is difficult enough that you can't achieve it on too low level a character unless you're obviously being boosted. On top of that, there's the actual affixes on gear as well. They want to cut out some of the more ridiculous situational damage affixes in favor of just making the more useful ones easier to get. They talked about how getting gloves with multiple different separate slots being bonus ranks to separate core skills isn't really ideal in their eyes at all and sort of just muddies up the pool, and neither are armor pieces that just roll 4 different elemental resist affixes. So it looks like, to me, one of the major steps they're going to be making is probably each piece of gear going to have more predefined slots, so to say. Something like if a helmet were to have one affix slot that affects damage, one affix slot that affects your skills, one affix slot that affects defensives, and one affix slot that affects utility. Then it just rolls each of these slots between the different affixes that could be in those types. Something like how the legendary aspects work almost, but for, equipment affixes, something like that. And they talked about wanting to give players more control over customizing pieces of loot that you find, rather than needing to search for that perfect 4 out of 4 piece of armor that takes days on end just to find one of. And to me, it started to sound like what they're going to be doing is giving us more freedom with the enchanting system. Something like make it so that you can actually reroll 2 different affixes on a single piece of gear instead of only one like it is currently right now. I think that would be in itself a really good way to make more gear actually usable and interesting to players, as well as suddenly you go from needing a piece to drop with 3 out of 4 perfect affixes to be worth paying attention to needing it to only have 2 out of 4, which is ridiculously higher likelihood. That said, it is just my bit of speculation based on what he was saying, but whether we get exactly those things or not, know that that's the type of stuff they are looking at, and the timeline on these major changes is Season 4, and that's set in stone. That's pretty much it then, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this breakdown of all the things that happened in the Campfire chat stream tonight, the last stream the developers of Diablo 4 are doing for the year. They've said that they will be doing a stream in January, of course, talking in depth about Season 3, because that comes at the end of the month, but for now, this is all they have to say for us. They've talked about everything for the end of Season 2, they've given us some stuff to look forward to in the future, so what do you all think about this? How do you feel about the run through the Abattoir of Zir, a Tier 1, a Tier 10, even though the Tier 10 arguably could have been a little bit better if they put the right stuff actually on, but it was still a pretty good showing and it gave us an idea of what we have to come just over a week from now. Again, patch notes tomorrow, but what do you think about all this? How do you feel about the event, and are you excited? Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.